Okay. All right. Thanks, guys, for coming today. So our special guest today is Jillian Ritchie, and she is the wellness coordinator at Concordia. Jillian has been a gardener for a while, and she currently is doing Instagram stories for the CU Student Experience at CU Student Experience, where she is providing weekly gardening tips for people who live in apartments. Maybe you have a balcony, or you're even just doing it in your kitchen. So she's providing some great stuff there. So I'm going to let Jillian say a bit about herself and why she got into gardening, why she loves it, and then we'll have a really great conversation. So thanks, Jillian.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm so happy to be here and talking about something that I love so much. So gardening has been part of my life. I mean, I grew up with parents who garden. My grandfather had a big garden when I was little. So some of my favorite memories of going to the cottage were going down to my grandfather's big garden and picking fresh peas and shelling them, or picking the fresh carrots out of his garden. So to me, I have really nostalgic memories about gardening. And then I realized as I started living on my own, wherever I had a little green space, I would always want to fill it with plants. And eventually I moved to a place where I had a little bit of a backyard, and that's where I started my first garden. It was actually in Dartmouth, where Ashley and I are both from Nova Scotia. So what I really loved about gardening is that, first of all, I learned a lot of patience, because gardening certainly takes that. But it's also a lot of trial and error. So I remember my first garden, I was so excited. I had planted everything that I wanted. And then a lot of root vegetables. And when I went to pick them, I, pulled them out of the garden. Sorry, I think my video is a little bit, little slow. But anyway, after my first garden, I was so excited about things, and then realized, well, the carrots didn't work because my soil's too rocky. And, so it's always a learning experience. Every time you move, it's something new. So it's always, I found it really teaches you to be flexible, to try something new. And the best part is that if something is successful, you either end up with vegetables to eat or a beautiful plant. So sometimes it's sad if things don't work out, but when they do, it really is, it's so wonderful. I actually just yesterday had my first harvest of beans from our garden. Yep, I had about 7 beans. They were the best beans I think I've ever had. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so why did you decide to start, or how did it come about that you started doing these gardening tips for the student experience? What do you think is the value of gardening for people, and why do you think that students should garden as well?
I think, well, we all know that just being in nature is so good for everybody's mental health, for your, just to connect back with yourself. And because we live in a big city and a lot of people live in apartments, it's not always easy to get out. And especially right now with COVID, it's harder to take any transportation to get out of the city, even to get over to, to a beach, or to in Verdun or any of these places. So I think sort of bringing this into your own home is really important, because even just a little bit of greenery, a little plant, it's something, I mean, I'm sure there are studies that are done about why, nature is beneficial for mental health or for well-being. But for me, it's just really, it's something I love. I love seeing flowers. I love in the middle of winter, I like trying to make my apartment as much of a greenhouse. And I think sharing some little tips with students is really important, because it's also so satisfying to grow something yourself. And it can be really easy, it doesn't require a whole lot of stuff. We have pretty awesome dollar stores that kind of set you up. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You just need a pot, some decent soil, and some seeds. And from there, it's really just trial and error. So the whole idea of the gardening tips at the CU student experience was just to share kind of weekly tips live as I'm growing things. I don't know if you saw last week, but it was kind of a, hey, we checked in and half the plants didn't make it, so we're gonna retry again. So unlike these perfect Instagram stories where it's like, and now my garden has become this really beautiful thing, I wanted it to really be real. And you know, sometimes those little toilet paper rolls really, you know, give a lot of green, and sometimes it doesn't. So for me, it was just something really fun that I could do to connect with students, because I think right now during COVID, that's one of the things I miss so much, is not being with students. And you know, I'm lucky throughout the year to get to work with our amazing Pure Wellness ambassadors. We've worked with the students from Multi-Faith. We've, you know, been able to collaborate with a lot of different partners. So in one way, it's just something sharing something that's a little bit personal, because right now we don't have, you know, the casual hangs in the hall or catch up over a cup of tea. So I think that's why I decided to share something I really enjoy, something hopefully the students will enjoy, and even better, that maybe they could eat something that they grew at the end of it. So I think it's a really rewarding process. It doesn't take a lot of money, and it's really fun, I think.
I think, like, for me, like, I didn't grow up gardening, and so the first time I gardened, I never realized how much I would like it. And so I, like, kind of hope that if students are listening or watching this right now, that, like, you know, if they've never tried gardening, that, you know, they uncover something as well. Like, do you have any tips for students who are, you know, totally new to this sort of thing?
Definitely. So if there are things that you want to start out growing, I mean, you can check our Instagram story, but there are some really easy ways to start growing greenery in your own home. So for example, if you are eating a romaine lettuce and you just save the very little bottom, put it in a little dish with water, and it's going to start sprouting lettuce again. So you can almost reuse your lettuce. Same with green onions, just save the very little bottom, stick them in water, and then they're gonna grow back. So these are really simple. It doesn't even require any dirt, just the vegetables you buy, glass or a little dish, and some water. But also, I mean, you know, if you want to spend a couple dollars on buying some little herbs, that's another really nice way to have something in your garden, but something you can use frequently. So I, you know, throw them in salads. I put mint in my tea all the time. I'm just kind of always seeing what I can use with the herbs. Also, they're really healthy. Herbs are great antioxidants, and so I would suggest if you want to start, you could either do things like that, or the people who work at, say, a Rona or your little corner store that sells little plants and flowers, they're quite helpful, and they can let you know. Because one thing that is a bit trial and error with plants is if you're doing something indoors, you have to make sure you have a plant that, if you have kind of a darker, shady room, you don't have a plant that's like super needs a lot of sun, or vice versa. So sometimes on my balcony, which you can see the picture behind me, it's actually a really shady balcony. So I get very little sun there. So I can't grow vegetables. I don't have enough light. So I've found different plants that work okay in shady areas. So I would say ask people who know, who either work at a store that you want to buy a plant from. If you want to plant from seeds, they have instructions on the back. So it's pretty easy to see, you know, based on what kind of space you have, how much light you have. One thing that I've learned more recently, one thing with COVID, is I've had some time to actually read gardening books. So for the past 10 years, it's really been trial and error. The way I operate is to really just kind of try it. And if it doesn't work, try it again. I'm not a meticulous planner. So, what I really learned was soil is really the most important thing to your garden. So, making sure that you have soil that's you add nutrients to it, which even your compost you can get from simple everyday things in your kitchen. Like I use coffee grinds, eggshells, and banana peels. And this is, the perfect mix and balance for your garden. So you don't even have to go out. Again, it's reusing your own compost. I find it really satisfying when I have, my nice yogurt container of broken eggshells and banana peels, and I'm putting it in the garden, thinking, just these little things that you can use of your own, ways to reuse it in your own garden, can be pretty rewarding.
So I have a question, not so much on the practicality, but very early on you said, Jillian, that we all like nature, which I think is true on one hand, but they are actually, and I'm one of them, I just would rather be in the country than in the city, but there are actually people who are urbanites, who thrive amongst the buildings, and there are also people who actually have not grown up with even, in grade school when we put a pea seed in and it actually grew. We didn't maybe harvest, but we actually saw something grow. And people who still think milk comes from cartons, or, I think it's also a bit of a privilege to be somewhere where there's lots of garden and soil. So I guess I'm wondering if you have, how do you inspire people? How do you sort of overcome that? It's for some people something totally new. How do you inspire people to really try that, or even just to get your hands dirty, physically, literally? We talk about get your hands dirty as a metaphor, but to actually get your hands dirty, how do we inspire people? And I'm sure there are some around Concordia who grew up in Montreal and other big cities, in in Delhi or in somewhere else, huge city.
That is a really good point, that if this is something that's, really you've never been exposed to, that it can be sort of intimidating to start. And I mean, I think for a lot of us, the thing about playing in dirt, it kind of brings you back to this childlike state. And it's one of these things that when you're outside, if you're, getting your hands dirty, or even if you're in your apartment, I mean, I don't have a lot of outdoor space at my apartment, so a lot of things that I do is inside. It's on paper bags, so I'm not spilling dirt everywhere. But I think just encouraging people that it really can be a way to, I mean, it's a wellness strategy, really. I find if it's something you want to explore into, start with a little plant, something that's very easy to take care of, and I mean, treat it almost like a little pet, and just see. I mean, it's amazing. I don't know how I could encourage or inspire someone to start if they've never done it, if they don't want to. But I would encourage people, if you are interested in starting some plants or just having a little bit of greenery in your house, probably buying a plant. Sometimes you can buy them for just a couple dollars, put it in a little pot and just water it every couple of days, see how it is. But I think what you'll see is that when you see that new little leaf or a new little blossom or it's these really small things. And that's what I find about gardening, is that it's not about this big, huge impact about going to, say, like the redwood forests or seeing, nature in this state that really brings you to a state of awe. This is something that I think is something so much more tangible and really just kind of creating a little green space in your house. I know in counseling services, that was one thing, that's where my office usually is during regular times. And even when setting up the Zen Dens, that was a really important thing for me, was making sure that we had greenery and we did have that, you know, trees or plants or something. And I think maybe even if people aren't conscious of it, when they come into a space and there is a plant or a tree or greenery, there is a sense of calm in a way. And it may not be so distinguishable because, hey, you walk through the hall building in the middle of exams and there's trees there, but it's still going to be a stressful place. But if anybody has ever gone up to the Concordia greenhouse, it's amazing. They have a phenomenal study space there for students when it's open. And I mean, I don't even know really what it is, but for me, just walking into a space like that is, I mean, I wish I was a student. I wish I had time to go study, or I could take meetings there. So I don't know, does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, I think you said a few things too. Like I guess in some way it's a living thing and a responsibility too. And I think it's a bit, like, I don't want to say it's a pet, but it's, what I like is even a little plant, you can watch it, you can see how much water it drinks, you can watch that little leaf grow. And so I think it's almost like, I don't want to make more of it than it is, but I think it is a lot. It is a relationship, because that plant, even that little plant, relies on you. And so if you go away for your summer, if you're a student and you have a little plant, if you go away for the summer, you need someone to look after it. And as we've had many discussions in our department about our office plants, many of them have died. Some of them we rescued. Or some of them, I brought some of mine home. Some of them were just done and it's fine. But some of them I'm trying to nurture back. And so I talk to them every day. It's like, how are you doing? Do you still have water? Or are you starting to look a little bit better? So, you know, some people think I'm crazy when I talk about talking to my plants, but I do think it is about that relationship. And so, and I like the way you talk about noticing the little things, like just noticing one leaf or one little, like, inch that it grew or something.
Absolutely, yeah. I think even like Jillian, you were mentioning the change day by day. For me, it's was my flowers in my garden, and every morning I go out just to see if one of them is actually opening, kind of thing. And I was waiting and waiting for the daylilies to finally come out. So yeah, just each day seeing, it's kind of like a miracle from one day to the next, how a plant can actually open and flower within one day, kind of thing. So yeah, it's very nice.
It is so beautiful. And I think also when we plant little things, you know, like the beans, for example, or, you know, our own lettuce or things, it brings us just that much closer to our food chain as well. And, you know, right now we're so, I guess, lucky and maybe spoiled that we have so many grocery stores that has every kind of produce always available at every time during the year. You know, I mean, it's now become kind of our expectation that we can get avocados in, you know, October, which isn't usual, but yeah, just this, you know, kind of just growing something yourself and eating it, you know, if it starts from a little seed and then you watch it grow and then, you know, kind of this full circle, it's really, it's so rewarding, I think, just to be like, I grew my own beans. I mean, it certainly wasn't a meal, but it was a nice snack.
And I guess, go ahead. Okay, in a sort of theological way, in a way, it's a bit of recreating, like reliving the creation story. Like all religions and cultures have creation stories, and I think we can actually witness that, to see a little seed, sometimes from actually something I ate, like I don't know, the seed from a cucumber. They were squash, are pretty big, so I can take it and keep it, and then to actually stick it in the ground and watch it grow and transform. That's pretty amazing that we actually see that we're part of creation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Connects us back that, we aren't so separate, and I think whether you have access to nature or you don't, I think, in some way it is important to bring some of that into your life and to find that, because nature can be a wonderful remedy, and we are lucky to be in this city where in Montreal right now, I know a lot of students are back home or other in many different places, but certainly Montreal has a lot of green spaces to go to, that just getting out, I like you said, Ellie, talking to your plants, I do that frequently. Since I was little, I've been told, oh, talk to your plants, they are like animals. So I think nurturing those relationships with, whether it's a plant or whether it's trees or anything, is really helpful. And I think now a lot of us, because our lives have been changed so drastically, that we are looking for different ways to cope and manage that. If, usually our time was spent, so busy, we're commuting, we're in class, we're in school or working, doing all these things, then maybe now with a little bit of time, especially it's summer right now, it's a great time to kind of try something like this. And also to not get too upset if you try it and it doesn't work. If something dies, or, it could be it got overwatered, it could be underwatered. So just having that flexibility, to not be too hard on yourself. If you buy your first plant and it dies, it's okay. That happens. There will always be more.
I think then people can go back a couple weeks ago and watch Mark's talk on learning through failure, and but does it give you like a confidence boost every time, something grows or something unexpectedly, like, just you see something really transform and you're like, I did that?
Absolutely. It's and again, it's still a learning experience. Like, I planted radishes this year and they all got like crispy and went to seed, and they look really pretty because they have a lot of flowers, but I won't get any radishes from them. So, when I get things like the beans, or I see like a couple little tomatoes growing, that absolutely is so rewarding. It feels so good that, that I grew something. I don't have pets or children or anything to take care of. So these are, for me, it's my fun little, they're like my little family, my summer family.
I was going to also ask, like, this sort of relates to what Ellie was asking, but for a lot of people, when they start working with plants, or even if they work with plants their whole lives, like, your relationship with plants and with nature changes. And so you talked about like talking to your plants and like, and I know like I do that too. I think a lot of us do. And so I was just wondering if there's any ways that, having plants or a garden or being in nature has sort of transform the way that you look at the world, or the way that you look at plants, or like your relationship with each other. So
one thing I've noticed, I absolutely use gardening as a tool for myself. So it's something that I found, now working from home and not having those same boundaries of being in the office and conducting a lot of meetings on Zoom, and, really trying, I find sometimes when I get really overwhelmed or I'm feeling, just kind of fed up with everything, I find myself going into the garden and, picking off the little tiny leaves and do like the most little meticulous things and sticking my hands in the dirt, because for me that is like physically touching the dirt. I don't know if it's like an energy release or what it is, but I find that's something that more and more I actually use as a tool for my own, wellness. but I do find I didn't grow up spending as much time in nature. I didn't grow up camping or anything like that. So it's really, as an adult, I feel like I've really formed this, I wouldn't say I didn't always love nature, but really this comfort and this almost need for nature in my life. And I don't know if that's been a result of gardening, but I know that every place I've lived in some way, shape, or form, whether it's been, on a windowsill or in an actual garden, there's always been plants in my life. Also, they aren't as much responsibility as a dog, for example, so it's a good starter on the responsibility levels of things. But yeah, I find what it helps me do is really slow down. And that's what I really love about gardening, about nature, about taking a walk in a park, is that especially now as our lives are all online, everything's moving so fast. Our information is coming at us at lightning speeds. It's, and to have only one platform to connect, to do all your work, I find that really challenging. So I find, even Ashley, you and I live in the same neighborhood, and we were able to meet in a park last week, and it was the most wonderful thing, just hanging out by a little pond and under some trees. So I think now it's really important to, if you haven't ever had a relationship with nature, try it out, because it's a really wonderful thing to, just go on a walk in a park, or go down by the water if you can go, or just get a little plant and talk to it. You could have a new friend.
Sort of reminds me of, I just remember that quote, I don't remember who said it, but nature never hurries, but she's always on time. And I feel like that's like a really good quote, and that plants are kind of the antidote to our fast-paced and now super extra technological world. And we just sit by the pond and you look at the trees, and they're sometimes a couple 100 years old, and they're never rushing anywhere, but they're always growing and just doing their thing.
It's wonderful. And the more you read about, trees and plants and the way that they actually communicate, it's really fascinating. I think that's a whole other topic, but again, I think like Ellie said, it's stop creating creating the space to connect, between us and nature. We're not two separate things. We're part of nature. We just do things a little differently.
I like to imagine sometimes that the trees might perceive us in the same way like we perceive ants, just wondering where we're rushing to, or looking at the small things, where are they going? Oh, they're running again. Well,
yeah, maybe what they're talking about is those crazy humans.
Yeah, what are they? Where they're lifting things?
Yeah, I always I wonder sometimes when I'm watching the birds and they look back at me and stuff, if they're just these creatures are so weird. What are they doing all the time? Why are they always building things? And
they make so much noise.
What are they talking to? We have a cell phone, but they're just does the human talk to itself?
I'm curious about this time thing, because sometimes I find there's the gardening, you're never done. There's always something else you can do. So if you have one house plant or 3 house plants, that's maybe different. But I do have a lot of flower beds and also a veggie garden, and there's always something that could be weeded or sorted out or tilled or watered, and the watering I find so hard because it needs it so desperately. And I also think I certainly don't water my lawn, but but anyway, that sort of notion I should really do this. Do you have any reflections on that? When is there a line at which gardening or anything like that becomes a burden?
Definitely. I mean, it can become a responsibility. I know even we, at my boyfriend's place, so that's where I have our vegetables, and it's a really, really sunny balcony, but it also means we can't leave it for more than a day or two, especially in heat like this. So, for example, on the weekend, we wanted to go away, but we needed to find someone to water the flowers. So, I mean, it certainly is a responsibility. I know, like you mentioned, Ellie, with your office, when the office is shut down, one of the saddest things I had to do was leave my plants behind because we had quite a collection of them.
Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah, so I mean, there definitely are, you know, I mean, it is responsibility. So you kind of have to weigh the responsibility with, you know, the outcome. Is the responsibility, is it more stressful than it's worth? If so, then, you know, I mean, one of my really good friends, he lives in St. Agatha, he has a beautiful garden, but he's always in the garden because it's his whole yard. So I think probably you just have to figure out where you are in life. Do you have time to take care of a garden? Do you have the resources? Do you have, if you're going to go away for a couple of days, can someone look after it? Houseplants are a little bit easier because, you know, you can go away for a couple of days and, you know, they're going to be fine. They can go a while without watering. So I think definitely if you're starting to garden, I mean, you know, if you have this big grand idea of, you know, turning your landlord's backyard into a giant veggie garden, you know, maybe rein it in a little bit, start out small. But yeah, I would say for me, I garden until it's, I mean, when it's enjoyable. I do it for enjoyment. I don't do it to, you know, sell produce or produce, you know, to do anything other than myself. So, you know, I found, you know, there was that certain point where like all of the seeds, they had popped and then they needed to go into other containers and I didn't have the soil and it was, you know, a moment of stress. But I got through that, and afterwards then it was, you know, it's been okay. And now we kind of have the, you know, if something dries out or it dies, then we'll try again next year.
Yeah,
I would love to see your garden though, Ellie. It sounds beautiful.
It's fun. It is, and I'm very lucky right now because it's. I often Zoom from there, but not today. I'm just looking out. But it is lovely just to sit there and see the different things pop up. And it's, I guess the other thing I like about nature, it's never perfect, whatever perfect is. But sometimes the most, you know, I took a picture of a poppy, but the edges were already starting to wilt, but it was beautiful. So just that notion that, you know, nothing is perfect. And actually, Mark, this morning, we had a team meeting and we always start with an icebreaker. And he invited us to talk about something we needed to let go of. And so gardening is a lot, if something dies, like, oh, I guess, you know, it's sort of the cycle of living and dying in a small and yet profound way that we can learn, and also letting go. It's like, I guess, there's a plant called the prayer plant. It's a house plant. Belinda has one at the office. I've tried and tried and tried to grow that, and I find it quite funny that I, as somebody who prays as part of my regular life, I can't keep a prayer plant. So, but it's just one of the, you know, it's kind of ironic, and that's fine. But I just, it's a lesson that, you know, some things we just got to let go of, and so that notion of letting go, failure, imperfection, I think that's a beautiful life lesson, and you talked about that. That was very helpful to be reminded of that.
Absolutely. I think you're so right. And it's true. We don't expect perfection from nature. We don't expect a tree to look like, you know, a child's drawing with like a nice little, and that is the beauty. You look at it and you look at the gnarled bark and you see all of these things. You see how beautiful it is, or, you know, little flowers that, you know, I think that's a beautiful thing to take.
So why do we expect it from ourselves?
Right?
Yeah.
Solid answer, Jillian. Here we go.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
Another Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
I think I know from, all the students I work with, perfectionism is a huge struggle, a huge challenge. And I think a lot of us do, we try to aim for perfection, and it can be so stressful. And sometimes, just letting go, knowing that just being ourselves, being true, our authentic selves is so much better than this made up, filtered version of whatever you want to be portraying.
But it is helpful, I think, to remind even myself and maybe students too, to say nature isn't perfect. Even if you look at your 7 peas or beans, what were they? Peas?
Beans. My beans.
7 beans. They were all different, I bet. They were different lengths. One was straighter than the other. And so there's no perfect bean or, a flower. It was what makes it perfect. And it's maybe a fleeting moment. So I think it's maybe a lovely lesson for each of us that like nature that we hold up as this model that's so amazing. There's nothing like perfection, or maybe the perfection is in being how it is. And so maybe the lesson for us is just how I am is perfect.
Absolutely. The perfection is in the imperfection.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like
that.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool. Mark, tell us about your gardening adventures.
Oh goodness! When you were mentioning the prayer plants, I was once on a return from Toronto. I'd been keeping a plant while I was there, and the prayer plant had been on the precipice of death. And then from whatever miracle, it blossomed. And I got home and the pot was too small. And so I put it in a slightly larger pot, just a bit bigger. And it was dead in a week. It just started to wilt. I was like, it's the same thing. And it died. So they're very delicate. I have this cactus. My friend got married last year in BC. And he had these cacti all over the tables. And I'm like, what are you going to do with the cactus? Is cacti. And he was like, oh, I don't know. We ordered them. And I don't know. The guests can bring them home. But I had to fly back to Montreal. So I smuggled this in a Gatorade bottle. And it survived. Now it's doing some really weird things. And there's these like leaves coming out the top on some of them. But other ones are starting to do a little rot. And I think it probably needs more sun. So yeah, plants are very delicate, and it's just coming to terms with the uncertainty.
Yeah,
I think he's really happy that you saved him.
I might want to go back to BC. That might be it. It's like, why did you bring me here?
He's trying to climb his way back to BC.
Yeah.
I find though that like from like growing plants and stuff that they kind of have a bit of personality sometimes, some of that is like, I'll have a plant and I keep trying to like push it in a certain direction to like grow up a certain wall and it's always just like, nope, like, it wants to go the other way, or like, and it's just really interesting. Like
I was literally telling my cucumber, I was like, good boy, because it was climbing up the right way. I was like, you're such a good cucumber.
I had 2 orchids and I swear they didn't like each other. I'm convinced of it. They were not the sort of the standard orchid, the Phalaenopsis, but they were some other thing. And they were both doing really well. And then I don't know if I moved them, but then neither of them did well. So I moved them apart. The one died and the other one is doing all right. But I'm sure it was sibling rivalry or something, but I don't know. But I mean, there was this book, Tomatoes like something, but there's certain plants that like to grow next to each other.
Roses love garlic.
Oh yeah, no, that wasn't a book. No, but
okay, that is another book.
Oh, okay, good to know.
Do they know? Should I plant some roses in my garlic patches?
This is apparently the title of the book, but it's interesting because when you look at like the whole principle of like permaculture gardening, it's really about diversity, about how the most successful crops are diverse crops. which also is interesting is, you know, working in a university where we're so blessed to have such a diverse population, and to really look at that. And, you know, if we duplicate that from nature, that's an environment that really thrives, is, you know, not these like monocrops. That's actually kind of, you know, destroying so much of our land. You know, if people are clear cutting trees and then they're not, you know, their roots are dying out, and then the soil's not retaining any nutrients. And so I think, you know, there's so many interesting things that parallel real life to gardening. And not, I guess a lot of people have Netflix, and there is a show called The Biggest Little Farm.
I love that.
We have been talking about that a lot.
so amazing. And I think for a lot of people, this is kind of, you know, the dream. Let's move out onto a farm. I think people are sort of changing how we eat. We're becoming more aware. People, you know, like this idea of being able to kind of be a bit more self-sustainable. So, you know, I think maybe that's the big long-term dreams of, I don't know, I would love to make something like that happen. But for now, you know, we've got the balcony gardens and trying out that.
I feel like gardening and farming are kind of becoming cool again, or maybe it was never cool, but it's like, you know, just more and more on YouTube, more documentaries, more organizations, and you see a lot of people like going back to plants or learning how to grow things on their balcony. And, you know, even with like Biggest Little Farm and stuff like that, like so many people saying, oh, I want to do that. And I think it's really great, because it's like, if we have so many more people interested in doing small local farms, like that's really good for us, and, you know, and good for the planet, you know, too.
And I think even, you know, if you look at Instagram, the person who has the largest following is this woman who's showing her life in rural China. What is her name again?
Oh, Lizi Qi, Liziqi.
So, you know, I mean, she has millions, probably hundreds of millions of followers, and really, it's, you know, a day in the life of, you know, this is how I farm and but everything that she does is really back to like very traditional. And she said she started these because she was talking to students. I think she was a teacher, and they didn't know where rice came from. They didn't know how it was grown. They just thought it was packaged and it arrived. And so she's realizing, you know, all of these kids are growing up having no idea where our food even comes from. So, you know, she started this, and now, of course, because she has hundreds of millions of followers and probably has, you know, sponsors, but her videos are phenomenal. And I think it shows that if this is the person who has the biggest following on Instagram, that this is something that people want. They want to see, whether they can access it or not, they want to see somebody going. They want to know, okay, what does, you know, the mulberry bush look like that the silkworms grow off, and how do you harvest the silk, and then how do you weave that into something, and, you know, and then what do you use for natural dyes? And, you know, at the end of the video here, she is wearing this beautiful cloak she made out of the silk she grew, you know, all of these.
I think the other story to that, or the other part of to that story, is how much work it is. You know,
absolutely.
And like I lived on the prairies, and like when things are busy, like they get up at 5 a.m. out in the field, and they work till sundown, which on the prairies can be 10:30 or 11. You know, and so this notion of like 9 to 5, and oh well, I'll finish this project tomorrow. You know, it's hard work, and I think like so many things, it all seems so easy, you know, like I don't know about those videos. I think I've heard of them now that you mention them, but this notion of like, oh yeah, I just, you know, just put a few seeds in, and now look, I have a bushel of beans, and I will cook them up with a little, you know, whatever I grew with. And it's like, that actually takes a lot of work and dedication, very much like, you know, students often see like, oh, all the other students get A+ and they don't study, and I have to work so hard, and I'm the only one who gets a B. It's like, no, I think it's just, again, a story, like, to be realistic, to say it's hard work, and with it comes with failure, and then that success and that deep joy, like, I grew 7 beans. And you'll grow many more, Jillian, I'm sure.
Hopefully.
But I think it's such a wonderful, like, it's a very real story, but also such a great metaphor for life.
I think, like, even in her videos, like, I find one of the most astonishing things about her videos, which are usually about 10 minutes long, is that she prepares them like 6 months to a year in advance. So if she is growing something,
Wow.
she takes footage of when she first like plants that thing. Like if it's cotton, like she's planting it, and then it's like, here it's fall, and then watching it grow. And so like you physically see like how long it takes. And I think that's like a, you know, really important thing, and also just really brilliant on her part to just show all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if people have this dream of wanting to move out to the woods and become self-sustainable, you know, it isn't a glamorous life. And like Ellie said, you know, it's work. It's a lot of work. And, you know, like anything, it can be taken to extremes. You can also work really hard at an office job. But it's really about finding the balance of what connects with you. And that's it. If your comfort is a couple of little house plants that are really easy to keep alive, everybody's like, oh, I even kill cacti. Like, cacti are really easy to keep alive. I find them really hard to keep alive. I don't know. They always die on me. Prayer plants, also, I killed one very recently. So, you know, these are things and things.
What's going on with these prayer plants?
I had that plant for 2 years, and then just all of a sudden, I didn't move it. It was in the same place. It just decided to knock off. So I think, you know, finding what your comfort zone is, you know, and what your space is. And if you know, you do have an opportunity, even just to go visit a farm or see, I don't know what the situation of like you pick places are. That's one of my favorite things to do, go like you pick strawberries or something. That way you don't have to do all of the gardening and all of the taking care of the crops, but you can go and still have that really satisfying, look, I picked these fresh berries. But yeah, I think mostly, if, you know, what I would say to students, if you want to start gardening or you want to start bringing some green into your life, do it on your terms of what you're comfortable with. Get a plant, start some seeds, or, you know, get a few more things. Ask questions, do some research. Lots of people are very passionate about gardening and would love to tell you, you know, many, many things. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Does anybody else have, it's getting close to 3, and so I guess if any of us have any like great comments or questions or any sort of additions, now would be a good time to do that.
Thanks for the talk.
I was just going to say, it's really nice. You're so enthusiastic, and so it's a really nice smile.
Thank you.
Yeah, make everybody want to go out and grow stuff and have house plants, house pets.
I hope so. It's a nice thing to do, I think. Yeah. I'm actually excited after this call. I've been in Zoom calls all day, so I will afterwards go out and check on my plants, see if there are any more beans that, you know, grew overnight.
I was just excited that my beans grew. I have ancient seeds, and I put them in, like, I must be like 10 years old. I just shoved a bunch in, and I watered my garden, the veggie garden, the other day. I thought I put it on at 7, and I saw at 10 o'clock, I thought, oh, I better turn off, and you got to turn it off. It's a soaker hose, so it doesn't get that much. And then at 6 in the morning, I woke up like, oh my gosh, I didn't turn off the garden. So I went out and turned it off. And then I'm sitting outside. We had church. I was worshiping outside, and I look over and I turned the other hose on. So I'd watered my garden from 7 at night till 10:30 the next day. But I think it was so dry. I loved it. So whatever. So
After like a week of heat wave, I'm sure it was happy.
So today I looked and the beans and pea plants are this high and some carrots are coming up. So I'm hoping someday in 6 weeks, I will report on my beans, hopefully, that I'll pick.
I will be awaiting a picture.
They post it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, this was really wonderful. I'm so glad I got to chat with you guys. Thank you for giving me space to talk about something I really love.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. And this was really great. And now I'm going to go check on my plants as well.
Good.
So I guess maybe we can just like go around and stuff, but maybe we'll stop the recording before that, and then we'll just do a quick debrief. But before we do that, next week, just for anybody who's watching this, there will be no Conversation Cafe next week, which is June 30th. And we'll be back the week after that, and Ellie has a guest for us.
Yes, so in 2 weeks, we'll hear from Lisa White, who is the Officer of Rights and Responsibilities at Concordia, and she's going to talk about liberating your inner advocate. And the following week, we are having a guest from Brian. Linda, help me out. Petter, thank you. Brian Petter, who is very involved in community building and community organizing on the South Shore. So we'll hear about that community engagement on the ground. So, and then after that, we'll actually take a break for the summer, and we'll be back in late August, September with more cafes. So maybe, Jillian, you can do another installment about looking back at the growing season. And also, it's often interesting how, I mean, summer is such a beautiful time in Montreal, but how do you nurture that sort of green thumb in the winter? I think that's could be an interesting conversation. I mean, houseplants, yes, but how else can we connect with nature in the winter climes? But that's not until October, November, so long time. There'll be lots of sun yet, so
good, thank goodness.
Yeah.